Good evening, everybody. Hey, welcome out to our training webinar tonight. It is Wednesday night. This is our regular weekly thing, and we appreciate everybody that comes out to participate in these and to join us. I think Steve, you can probably hear us okay. Come through okay?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Um, you know, for those that are here, feel free at any point during the training to jump in if you have any questions, anything that you would like to know. We love to answer questions, and we're hoping that the things we're focusing on here are things that will be most likely to help you. So we wanted to talk about a little bit different topic today. The topic being the new foreclosure opportunity. We're at a unique point in time right now, and we wanted to take a moment to try to identify it to everybody so that you can see, because I think oftentimes when you're in the middle of something, you don't necessarily see it. It's like not being able to see the forest from the trees. And we are in the midst of some incredible changes in real estate, and changes really in almost every industry with the way that technology has changed. But you can do things today that you just couldn't do that many years ago. It wasn't possible. It didn't exist really. And so we have a unique opportunity right now, I think, to get on board, to invest. And let's talk a little bit more about what some of this stuff is. Before we dive into too much of the training itself, my guess is maybe some of you have heard before of the great land giveaway. Well, the way that we feel is that the next great land giveaway has already started, and we want you to be ready. The original land rush was in 1889, and this was where people rushed into those unassigned lands, and there were like 50,000 people that lined up to race and to go out there and to choose their plot. Well, this is as close to that type of a giveaway as we've ever been to as a country, which is crazy if you think about all of the time that real estate's been available and where we're at now, and that we'd be giving away property in 1889 and then again in the mid 2017, 16s. So let's talk about exactly where some of these opportunities come and where some of these land giveaways can be found. And we're also going to talk about a number of different topics here. So the main point we're talking about here with land giveaways is this, and it's something that Steve and I have focused on specifically lately. But that is, there are many counties out there. There are probably hundreds, maybe, I don't know if I would say there's thousands, but there's definitely probably hundreds of counties throughout the United States in different locations that have an unusually large over-the-counter collection of properties that are still on their books. Okay, they have properties that they've been sitting on for a long time. And for counties, if they don't sell those properties, then that money is not doing anything. It's still just tied up into that property, essentially, until they can get the property sold. So counties are beginning to think straighter than they've thought in a long time, because they're actually willing to sell these properties for less than the taxes that are owed. In county terms, that means they are desperate. That means that's like the last straw. Like, last thing they do is basically forgive the amount that's owed in taxes. At that point, they pretty well drop the price of the property down to $50 or $100. And the only thing they could do from there, is to make it physically free. Okay, but we're talking about property, not junk property, good investments, sweet properties that are worth a significant amount that you can pick up for as little as $25, $50, $100. We're talking about getting started for a really small amount of money. If you want, Steve, you can kind of elaborate with them a little bit on what we see here.
Yeah, there's there's just a ton of opportunity. I mean, the great thing about this is there's opportunities in almost every state. And so some states are going to be different. Some states are going to have properties you can pick up for $100 or $150 or $200. Some states it may be a little bit more than that, but there's going to be opportunities in most tax deed states that offer over the counters to pick up valuable properties for under $1,000. In fact, this property down here on the bottom that you can see in this example, this is a property that we're looking at right now. In fact, I was just doing some research on it before we got on the webinar this evening, and this is in Florida, and this is on an over-the-counter list. So this was actually offered at a deed sale. Now, this county doesn't have their deed auctions online, which means that they can't market those to everybody. They can just market it to the people that show up at the local auction. And so this is on an over-the-counter list. It's about $6,000 to pick up this property, and it's a commercial piece. And I actually just found a property that's right next to this property. Essentially, this property has an address of 306 and the other property is 316. So it's essentially just two buildings over that's currently for sale for about $85,000. So we can get a pretty good idea of what types of properties are out there. The property up in the top right-hand corner was picked up by one of our students for $39. He was able to turn around and sell it to the neighbor and make a great return. The property on the bottom was purchased for $91. That nice building lot you can see up at the top was purchased for under $700. And so there's all these different types of opportunities out there. It's really just a matter of going through and researching and finding these different opportunities. And when you're investing in a property like this, you're not going to be investing a huge amount of money, so there's not going to be a huge amount of risk. And as long as you're picking that property up for anywhere between 1% to 10% of the property's value, it's going to be a property that you can turn around and sell and make a return on, usually in a pretty short period of time. So when we talk about doing a flip within that 3-month period, that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, in fact, for those of you that are here that are looking for a way to build up the capital that you're working with, this is an investment strategy that takes very little startup capital. I mean, you could take $1,000 here and make something of it. You could actually make money with $1,000 here with these types of properties. And if you wanted to buy many of them, again, it doesn't cost a lot. So for those that are looking to build up their capital, those that don't have a lot of capital here to begin with, this type of a strategy is ideal for a lot of reasons. Okay, we already know that there are lots of these properties on the books, and that the counties are already willing to forgive the amount that's owed and just basically sell the properties for whatever they'll sell for. We know that they are already at that point that they're basically desperate to sell. Now, the other thing that we know about these types of properties is that they are the most common property you find at tax sales. Raw land or unimproved land is what you would normally come across, and in the past we've spent so much time looking at just the properties with improvements, and we just kind of gloss over the land, but the reality of it is that the land is the real gold here, and it's because there's less competition. There is certainly more of this land, and this is the most common thing you're going to find. So when we say that we're getting this stuff, we're looking over the counter. We're talking about properties that have been sitting on the books for years in some cases. Okay, we can see how long they've been sitting on the books. Nobody's wanted to purchase them because they had this outrageous tax bill associated with them. It's only been recently that counties are suddenly beginning to forgive that debt just so they can get another property owner to start paying property taxes on a property. In other words, could you imagine if 5 or 10% of your inventory was like this or in a situation like this, which it begins to build up for them, so they have to have a way of unloading this. And what we need to realize about this is that they're relying on us. We're the investors that should be there basically to buy this. We're the only ones that really know how. There just aren't that many people. It's not like these people have lots of people going, to their websites to look at all their stuff and to buy everything up. I mean, you can go look at these websites and their lists. I mean, every county here that has a list like this, the list is usually quite large, and you can always find gems in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that's so nice about land is the the ability to sell it. I mean, when we're looking at structured properties, there's a lot of different more steps. I mean, we need to physically inspect the property. Then we need to have somebody get into the property. Which may take a locksmith. If somebody's still in the property, we may have to go through the eviction process. So there's all these additional steps. And so especially when you're starting out, when you're looking at your money is going to be better spent investing into some type of building lot that you can turn around and sell and not go through all those additional steps, but also gives you the ability to be able to sell it without actually going out to the property. So it's the way where you can go ahead and get started without completely building a full-on out power team, which is it's going to take that type of power team in place to maybe do a deal with a single family home that you're going to have somebody go out there and fix the property up, evaluate it, do all of these different things. With a piece of land, you can just do a comparative market analysis, put it for sale on eBay or a land site or one of these different classified sites, and go ahead and offer it for sale. You can sell it to a neighbor. So it gives us a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, in fact, land does carry a lot of flexibility that you just can't get with any other properties. And something else to consider here is your overall risk. Are you somebody that's kind of risk adverse? Do you have a hard time pulling the trigger on things? Well, then these are the perfect investments for you, okay? Because if you are buying $100 property, what's your overall risk? The most your overall risk can be is what you're paying for the property, $100, okay? And even then, you're buying a property for $100, okay? And it's not some kind of a scam thing. It's going to be in your name. You are the full owner of this property. There's no other liens or encumbrances attached to the property. You have the power to sell it as you wish. And again, you can pick these things up for almost nothing, okay? So there's so many opportunities out there. Like I said, these are just the over-the-counter properties that we like to look at because we can always find them. They're always out there. But that's just how common it is to find good pieces of land. And we're going to talk about what constitutes good, what exactly it is that we're looking for. We're also going to talk about foreclosure a little bit because there's a lot of confusion I think that people generally have about foreclosure. And since the topic was the new foreclosure opportunity tonight, we wanted to get into a little bit more detail here and make sure that everybody here understands exactly how the foreclosure process works, understands what it is, because a lot of people think they know, but they don't, and for some people they just have no idea. They didn't realize that that it is complicated as it is, or that there are so many moving parts. So when we start to mention things like foreclosures, what do you think about? Do you picture, like in this case, like mortgage foreclosures? Is that what comes to mind, or do you think of something more like this? Or like a local government foreclosure, like a tax sale foreclosure, okay? Again, there aren't that many people that actually understand the differences here between the two. So we wanted to get specific here and define terms and also make sure that everybody understands how these things are separated. So if we're talking about foreclosure as a general term, what we mean by that is foreclosure is, the legal act of removing property ownership rights due to an unpaid debt, okay? If we're looking at on just a surface level of foreclosure, we can say, okay, if it's due to an unpaid debt and, you're having your property owner rights removed, then that would apply. But the reality of it is there are two types of foreclosure. There is what's called a judicial foreclosure and there's a non-judicial foreclosure. And it's important to understand the differences between the two, what makes them unique, because this is also where the power of tax sale investing is found. The foreclosure process is where we, as investors, it's one of our greatest tools, is that foreclosure, because, well, in fact, we'll get into some details here as to why that is such a good friend to us here. Yeah, if you want, Steve, you can talk a little bit about some of the differences here between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as far as what it really comes down to when we're looking at judicial foreclosure, it essentially is a true foreclosure. Well, what that means is this is going to be done exactly according to state law, and it's going to be really a court procedure. It's going to be a process that goes through the court that takes a bit of time. And going through a judicial foreclosure is also going to extinguish any type of additional liens or encumbrances on the property. This is the reason why, a tax foreclosure is essentially a judicial foreclosure. It can take anywhere between 3 to 6 months generally to go through a tax foreclosure, a judicial foreclosure. Now, a non-judicial foreclosure, these are usually done by the banks. And what this is this is kind of an out clause that the banks have within the contract because essentially they own the property at that point. And so because they own the property, because they're still holding the note on the property, essentially this allows them to go ahead and do a foreclosure on the process and automatically be able to sell their interest in the county courthouse. Now with a non-judicial foreclosure, like a mortgage foreclosure, it's not going to extinguish all of the remaining debts. Essentially what they're doing is the bank, and it's usually going to be done through the bank. The bank is foreclosing on their interest in the property and essentially selling their interest in the property. So that means that they're going to be able to essentially get the title of the property, but there's going to be all these additional, if there's a second mortgage or anything like that, it would still be attached to the property. So that's what makes tax deed investing and tax deed foreclosures, such a great, unique opportunity is because it's going to be done through the traditional judicial foreclosure.
Yeah, I think the judicial foreclosure is it's easy to overlook just what a powerful thing it is, but one thing our government has never done is it's never taken taking property away from people lightly. That's always been something that they just didn't want to have happen. They didn't want they didn't want any government, whether it be a state government or a federal government, to take property away from people. That was what they were trying to get away from. And so the judicial foreclosure is really a quite powerful foreclosure. And it's there because we need it, definitely, but it's completely different from non-judicial foreclosures. And when most people think about foreclosures, it's always non-judicial foreclosures that come to mind. But the reality of it is, a non-judicial foreclosure isn't really even a foreclosure. I mean, in a way, property ownership was never really transferred because, if Bob is late, with his mortgage and he doesn't pay his mortgage a couple times, the lender can foreclose on him, but it's not like they had the property issued to Bob at that point anyway, because they don't do that until it's paid off. Until that point, it's still under their name. So the foreclosure, a mortgage foreclosure, is really more of it's really more just about the lender trying to resell the property than it is about any kind of real true foreclosure. It's a breach in the contract between the borrower and the lender. Definitely, that mortgage, that foreclosure exists there, but outside of that, it doesn't really have a lot to do with the property itself. Now, a few other details here regarding different aspects of judicial foreclosure. Like Steve mentioned, they follow state law very closely, and you'll find that every state has a lot of laws related to foreclosure and exactly how it's to be executed. And that means that in state law, they outline these specific steps and the procedures that are required, meaning who needs to be contacted, how much time. I mean, they really detail every part of that. And the reason for that is, first off, they want to have, everything needs to be by the book. And so they want to do everything the way that it's supposed to be done. But also, in addition to that, they don't want to take property away from somebody that deserves the property. In other words, they don't want to violate anybody's rights, and so they're very careful about doing this. They're careful to contact every property owner that has interest in the property, and that's why you so oftentimes see tax deeds redeem right before the sale. It's because the county is making these efforts to try to get the individuals to pay the taxes and avoid foreclosure. And, that's what they normally do. Most people don't lose their property to foreclosure. Um, let's see here. Now, yeah, basically the foreclosure laws will set a lot of the timetables, but if we're looking at how judicial foreclosure as a whole works, one of the most important aspects of the foreclosure process is notifying any parties that have a financial interest in the property. So this could be, if there was a lender, if it's just a single owner, in some cases there are lots of owners that are involved. And state laws will require that each one of those individuals receive a foreclosure notice that tells them how much is owed, what the foreclosure date is. They need to make this out plainly so that the party receiving that notice understands that they're about to lose the property. The notice has to be sent by certified mail so they can track that too. And all of these things are done in an effort to ensure that they don't violate somebody's rights. So the other thing to understand about foreclosure here, since we're talking about it, is self-executing and non-self-executing foreclosure. If you want, Steve, you can tell them just about that. I actually don't have a slide for that, but I figure since we're talking about foreclosure, it'd be a good time to at least explain that side of it so that anybody here understands how
Sure.
Essentially,
Really what it comes down to is who's going to be doing the work. So, with a that's really going to be the difference between a self-executing and non-self-executing foreclosures. Essentially, with a self-executing, you're going to be able to, the county's going to be able to take you through the process. It's going to be done through the county, so you have to do certain things, fill out certain forms, pay certain fees, but the foreclosure is handled by the county. In the other case, that's essentially where the foreclosure is going to need to be handled by you, which means that you're going to need to get an attorney or go through the proper steps to be able to go through the foreclosure process.
Yeah, which may or may not be an issue depending on where you're investing. If you're dealing with like tax deeds, not an issue. That's really something. The self-executing or non-self-executing really only applies to liens because when you go to buy a tax deed, it's already been foreclosed on. But if you're looking at buying liens, it's something to consider when you are looking into some of these areas as to like whether or not they do self-executing foreclosures like the way that Florida does. Florida uses a self-executing foreclosure system, so they handle all of the foreclosure work, and we basically just submit a form. And they do that because they're preparing that property to go on their tax sale. That's how Florida does it. They're a little bit backwards here in how they do it, but it also is another layer there that ensures that the property is going to get sold. The real benefit or advantage, though, of a judicial foreclosure is that it's a first position. Just like tax liens are a first position lien. This foreclosure wipes out anything, wipes out any and all encumbrances attached to the property. And that's why if there was a mortgage attached to the property, it's gone. That's a question we used to get all the time from people because it was hard for people to grasp that could even be possible. But the reality is that mortgage really is just another owner of the property. And when it comes to judicial foreclosure, that is king. Nobody can stop judicial foreclosure if that's what the county wishes to do, and the property taxes haven't been paid. So, it's the county's right to do that, and it's how they go about collecting delinquent property taxes. Now, there's some reasons why we don't really bother with bank foreclosures. If you want, Steve, you can tell them why we don't bother with bank foreclosures, or why we don't see them necessarily as a special experience or something we want to get involved with.
Well, really, it's kind of an opinion that we developed a long time ago, and that was because we attended our first tax sale. Before we ever attended a mortgage foreclosure auction, we attended a tax sale, and at the tax sale we saw properties starting at 10, 15% of market value and being able to be sold at discounted prices. When you're looking at a mortgage foreclosure, the problem with the mortgage foreclosure is essentially you are just paying, or you're buying that person's debt on the property. You're essentially getting a deed to the property, but you're buying their stake in that property. And so because of that, there can be a lot of different problems that can eventually come up when you're dealing with these type of properties. But in addition with that, you're also going to be usually paying a lot more. You know, a mortgage, usually if it goes to a foreclosure, it's because the property owner has not been paying the property mortgage, not been paying the mortgage on the property, and so the property is actually usually going to be listed for pretty high or close to the asking price. That's the reason there's not as much room with a mortgage foreclosure. In addition to that, you're not going to go through the real foreclosure process, so you're not going to get that judicial foreclosure. And so, really from the very beginning, we looked at both of them and we said, well, why would we do this when this is so much better? And so because of it, it's really nothing that we've focused on. And we've got lists before in the past for some of our students, but it just wasn't anything that really interested us because the risk was much higher and the cost was much higher. And the competition was actually higher as well.
Yeah, that didn't really make any sense to us, and we could tell the mortgage foreclosures just by the numbers alone. If we didn't, if nobody told us, hey, these are mortgage foreclosures, we would be able to figure that out after looking at it for a second because the numbers are so different. They're just so starkly different from what you find with a tax sale, and there's a reason for that. The mortgage company may offer to sell, their foreclosed on properties, but really that's just kind of a gimmick for them to, to be able to offer the properties for sale. And maybe if they've got one that has problems, maybe they can give, a bit of a discount. But mostly they just want to get a new owner in it, And one thing that the mortgage company is definitely about is making money. They're not in business of losing money here, and so that's going to limit whatever kind of a discount you can actually get off of that property. So I have 10% listed here, but you might have a hard time getting 10%. I don't know if you're going to get necessarily any more than that because anything you get is basically money out of the lender's pocket, and they're not used to losing money on this kind of stuff. So, that's why these things sell for such an expensive price, but it's also what makes tax deeds so good. And that is, tax deeds are the only form of real estate that doesn't have a property owner involved that has a personal interest in what the property sells for. It's the only investment like this, that doesn't have that personal interest. And the county, as long as it gets an opening bid amount, they're good to go. They don't care what it sells for. So, that lack of personal ownership there on the part of the county is what makes it possible for us to buy these properties at such a great price, because there's nobody there that's thinking to themselves, oh, I'm losing money on I'm going to lose money on this, or I'm going to lose money on that. The property's already been foreclosed on, the money's already been lost. Okay, so at this point the county is just trying to cover their losses. They're just trying to do what they can here, and the best thing they can do really is to get a new property owner in there that starts paying the property taxes, because it has been probably years since the property taxes were collected there. So I think it's a measure they take just to try to stop the bleeding, basically, and start trying to bring in some kind of revenue. Okay, so we're going to talk about what we're looking for in these properties, because unless anybody has any more questions here about foreclosure, and about the different types. If anybody has anything else, please let us know. But what we want to talk about is unimproved land, and what we're looking for when it comes to investments. The image here in front of us right now, that's a perfect example of the types of properties that we're looking for. And if you look at that for a minute, why do you think that is? Why do you think? Just from that picture, you should be able to tell several different reasons why why this would be a desirable piece of property. But to name a few, you can see there are homes in that area that appear to be newer, and if you can look and see values attached to each one of the properties there as well. But you can see that this is a slow growing new subdivision, basically. I don't know if it's new, but it appears like it is growing because the homes are not that old and they tend to be pretty spaced out. So something like this is perfect because properties like this are the most common ones to go to foreclosure, and that's because they're oftentimes owned by a single individual, and the foreclosure notices only go out to maybe one party, or people just are, the first thing they're going to let go is a piece of land like this because they can let it go and it doesn't kill them. You know, it's not like losing your house.
A lot of times these type of properties were essentially investments gone bad. You know, they were investments that somebody purchased, was hoping to hold on to it, maybe build something, maybe do something with it. Maybe it was just a straight up investment that they wanted to get in on the real estate market when it was high, and then suddenly life happened and they got behind on their property taxes, and they essentially lost the property. And also when looking at this property, you can see that, like Shade mentioned, these homes are really new. In fact, the property that's just kind of across the street, you can see that it's actually still in the process of being built because you can see that it has no driveway yet. So they're still pouring the foundation. I mean, they're still going to, pour the driveway and finish doing the landscaping on that property. So we're looking at a newer area that has higher value properties. And so in looking at one of these building lots, it's really just going to be a matter of cost. What can we acquire that property for? So we can see that they're worth about 40 as far as the assessed value or maybe the market value. What would we be willing to pay, or what is going to be the cost? At $30,000 is probably not a very good deal, but at $1,000 or under, well, you're suddenly looking at buying that property. Even if you turn around and sold it for 10 grand and you paid $1,000 for it, you could still make a massive return.
And imagine if it was $150. You know, when we talk about land giveaway, this is what we're talking about. You know, we're talking about property that is priced so low that it might as well be free. You know, I mean, if you think about it, to pay such small amounts for property is nothing. I mean, people spend $100 there, $100 there on all sorts of different things, but feel like they can never really get started with investing. Whereas with this type of investing, you can take $100 a lot further than you can with anything else. Yeah, this area is fantastic for lots of reasons. These are my favorite types of areas. When we're looking at land, because they're predictable. You have an area there that's obviously growing, that people are moving into, and those lots have, they have a real world value there. And so, like Steve mentioned, it's all about the buying price. When it comes to almost any piece of property, it really always comes down to what the price is on it. Price is kind of what dictates everything. So just quickly here, some of the benefits or why invest in land. We've mentioned a lot of these things here already, but here's a list of them that we can kind of go through. It's easier than land with improvements, undoubtedly easier, because you don't have, generally it's going to be quite a bit less than the property with improvements, but you also don't have the same issues to potentially worry about. Land generally is what it is, so you don't have to worry about it changing so dramatically. It requires less capital. That's kind of been the whole thing we've been talking about here, is this is a land giveaway. And so there's really no reason for everybody here to not be able to buy this stuff, because you don't have to sink in large amounts of money. You can buy these things for, essentially you can get started on almost any budget, I guess is what we're pushing. When you can buy properties for less than $1,000 that have this value. And the other thing to remember too is that the internet has changed lots of things other than just tax sale investing, and one of the things it's changed is how easy it is to sell things. If you haven't sold things on a large market, there are so many tools now. The internet makes it so much easier than it was 30 years ago to sell something. You can literally get, you can get an ad out in front of so many people now. Just a number that it would be impossible to get in front of, years ago without being on television and radio and some of the other things. So we're at an amazing point there as well, where selling these things is easier than it's ever been before. More options to choose from. Like we said, these are the types of properties that make up the bulk of what ends up in tax sales oftentimes. And so there are a lot of these. Easier to sell, yeah. And one of the reasons why they're easier to sell is because you're buying them for a lower price, which means you have lower expectation on what you sell it for. You know, that's really what a lot of that comes down to. When you have something that's difficult to sell, it's oftentimes because you paid X amount for it, which makes you, you know, you're automatically committed to needing at least, you know, this amount in order to make your return on it. But if you don't pay very much for the property, it opens up a lot of options, and the price can make up for a lot, you know, with properties. So this is the cheapest real estate available as well. You know, you won't find real estate cheaper than this anywhere. And yeah, I think less risks and potential complications. You know, there are so many different things about it to love. But yeah, essentially what we're talking about here with these properties, if you want, Steve, in fact, you can kind of review, I mean, essentially what we're doing here, you know, as far as we want people to begin. There are so many different places where they can begin, but you can start with different tax deed states, even the tax lien states. Oftentimes, tax lien states seem like they will end up having some kind of a tax deed sale at some point, you know, throughout the year. I mean, it seems like almost everybody has a tax deed sale. Is that what you've seen?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, really, when it comes to this, I think you can really start in any state. I mean, there's going to be, yeah. Can you hear me? I know it says I'm having difficulties.
Oh yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. You know, as far as the states, there's going to be really any state has good opportunities. So if they're going to sell property for just the delinquent taxes, any over-the-counter tax deed is going to have a good opportunity. And then there's going to be some states that offer them for discount. States like Pennsylvania, Michigan, some of these other states where you can pick up these properties for even a discount. But I'm just going, you know, just today I was going through just an over-the-counter deed list in Florida, and I have found single-family homes, mobile homes, commercial properties. In fact, just that commercial property we showed earlier was on the same list where I found several different other types of properties that are essentially over the counter. Now, these ones are going to be anywhere between 10 cents, 10 cents on the dollar, but you're still looking at great opportunities. So really, there's going to be opportunities in almost every state.
You know, one of the questions that we have it is a great question. You know, it says some areas require a minimum amount of land in order to build a house. How do I find out if there is a minimum? I think we've actually got a little bit easier solutions for some of this, because you're right. You know, most areas will have some kind of a minimum amount of space, but it also ends up being something that takes care of itself logistically. Just because if you get too small of a piece of land, you really can't do anything with it anyway. But the easier way is, I think, we generally try to stay away from properties that are anything like less than about 1/10 of an acre. We try to avoid, because once it gets down below 1/10 of an acre, you know, there's only I mean, at 1/10 of an acre, you might be able to fit a mobile home on it, but that's about it, right? Isn't about the size of a mobile home lot? It's about 1/10 of an acre.
Yeah, I mean, a mobile home lot, you might have, you know, 1/7 to 1/10 an acre, but that's going to be usually just for those type of lots. And the thing about determining, you know, how big the home needs to be, it's pretty easy to tell when you start looking through the GSI maps on that particular property, because you're going to be able to see, okay, this lot is 0.16 of an acre. It seems like it's kind of a small lot, but then as you look and see at the other homes in that area, they're all about the same size. They're all going to be about 1/16 of an acre and 1/18 of an acre. So you think, well, yeah, this is only 1/18 of an acre, but this is going to be a normal, normal size. If you want any more information than that, then it's just a matter of contacting the county, or even that. A lot of times that information will be available right there on the county assessor's information or the property records section. That'll determine exactly what those qualifications are and the zoning codes. You're going to find that information within there. But you can usually get a pretty good idea as you just start looking through. So if you're looking at a building, like a building lot, and you see that it's the same size as the building lots within the subdivision, and there's homes within those building lots, it kind of gives you a pretty good idea.
Yeah, and in fact, yeah, she's saying that she's living in an area where the minimum was 1 acre. Which there are lots of different places that sometimes have different types of like building codes, essentially. And some places are more strict than others. I personally love that idea. They have to build on at least 1 acre. That sounds like nice. That sounds like nice rural area. That sounds great to me. Oh yeah, mountain septic system. Yep, that's my kind of place. As far away from civilization here. If I need to run on a generator, that'd be just fine. Oh, let's see here. All right, so yeah, essentially what we're talking about here is, like Steve said, you could almost begin in any state. We've been focused on over-the-counter just because it's easy, but you can also pick these things up from live auctions if you've got one taking place close to you, or online auctions as well. And the exit strategy is essentially something you're going to have to consider before you buy these things, because it becomes part of what your plan is when you get them. You want to have kind of an idea of what you can do with the property, but again, price kind of dictates everything. If you can pick it up for a low enough price, you can sell it, because you just don't have to get that much. I mean, the lower the prices that you pay for it, the lower the prices you'll be able to offer it to people, which means that it will sell for, it'll eventually sell because price ultimately rules. Okay. So what exactly are we looking for when we're looking at these? Oh, sorry, it's just jumping around here on me. What are we looking for with these properties? What are some of the things that we look at? Here are 5 different things that we consider with land. They are the size, value, zoning, the use and accessibility, and also what exit strategy will be most likely to utilize with that property. Which really, when you go to look at it, oftentimes you'll have an idea of what exit strategy will work out best for it, because some properties property's unique in that way, and you find some that work better for some exit strategies than others. Sometimes it's something that directs you. It's one of the reasons why you buy certain investments. Okay, so size, which we talked about this just briefly a second ago, talking about small pieces of land, that are smaller than 1/10 of an acre. This is also the shape of the property is important too, because the size, the property could be, it could be 1/2 of an acre or even a full acre, but it's 2 feet wide and 400 feet long. You are looking for properties that have a fairly regular shape, and if it's anything too extreme, it's not really going to be very usable. This property we're looking at down here below, I mean, it's actually huge. It's like 56 acres. But what we're generally looking for, though, are some of the bigger lots, just because we're going to have more options with them.
Yeah, well, even in that 56 acres, you can see the lots to the right and to the left of it, and you can see how those lots are each, divided. And so if we were looking at this on an overhead map or a GSI map that had the satellite image as well, we could see, okay, that's an average size lot, or this is going to be a massive lot. And just like Shade said, I mean, your most building lots are going to be between, 0.15 in some areas where they do kind of smaller homes or different types of homes, older type homes, up to about 1 acre. Sometimes you'll get large lots that are larger than that, but those are going to be, usually you're going to be looking between a quarter acre to a half acre. You're going to find a lot of lots in that range as you're going through and looking at these different lists. If you're looking just at building lots, and then above that you're going to have larger tracts of land. So it may be a building lot, but it's essentially 5 acres or 3 acres or 1 acre or whatever it is. But given, just like Shade mentioned, given the boundary and the shape and the size, you're going to be able to determine what the use of the property could be, along with the zoning.
Yeah, yeah, I think the GIS maps are so helpful. I think that's something that everybody should get into a habit of pulling up, um, you know, on every property search they do because there's so much valuable information. And oftentimes, if you can figure out the GIS system, well, you can master, the property tax record. Property value, is the other thing, we're looking at here when we're talking about land. And part of the reason for that is because we're looking for properties that have use and value. And the assessed value of the property is an indication of what the property is worth, because that's basically how the county is taxing it. The value is also important to us, though, because it gives us an idea of whether we're right about the property being valuable or not. Ultimately, I guess when we're looking at cheap deeds, it's not always the case, but the assessed value, is important for us. Now, it's also important to remember that when counties put these properties on the books, so when a county has county-held property, remember that they lower the assessed value of the property in many cases down to zero, so that the property doesn't owe anything in property taxes. So you might be looking at the property at that time, and the assessed value could be, it could be zero, or it could be a very low amount, in which case you need to go back and look in some of the past years to see what it was at before, to get an idea of what it will eventually go back to.
Yeah, you can also check out some of the other properties within the area to get a sense of the assessed value as well. I mean, that's the one thing that's nice about becoming proficient at reviewing county records, is not only can you review the record of property that you're looking at, but you can find neighbors, you can find people that you're going to send letters to ask if they'd like to buy the property. We can find all this additional information, the sales history of the properties next to it, to see when those properties sold and how much they sold for. And so we can find all of this information. This is really kind of that due diligence process, is really just reviewing the property value, making sure that there's value, that there's a use, and that you're purchasing it at the right price. Those are really the only things that we're looking for, and if all of those things come into play, then you're looking at a good, safe investment.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, we our deed to value ratio ends up being an important factor that creeps up, which we use for everything. The deed to value ratio tells us so much, and so if we see a property we think we can pick up for 5% of value, it's probably going to be a fantastic deal. The other thing that's important to remember about the value of the property is that property is going to have annual property taxes owed. Now, I think the reality with most all of these properties and the kind of prices that we're talking about, you could probably buy properties like this and just sit on them and do nothing else at all and still come out of it really good, because you purchased a piece of property outright, and now you're basically just waiting for it to appreciate, and you didn't pay very much for it to begin with. So you would still make money if you didn't do anything at all with it after that. And in fact, there are lots of people that buy property just to have it in their portfolio, because they can borrow against it. They can. It's kind of a security blanket. It's just one more way for them to divest. And so, let me move here. Okay. If you want, Steve, you can tell them a little bit about the zoning. I think the zoning is fairly straightforward, but I think it's also I think a lot of people probably don't understand it quite as well as they should.
Yeah, I mean, really what zoning is just going to come down to what the county has classified the property is. What is the use of the property? And so with zoning, it's going to come down to, is the property improved or is it vacant? And then from there also there's going to be the different categories. So obviously, residential is one that we're going to come across a lot. We can also see commercial, industrial, and there's some other additional zoning types as well. And in addition with that, there's also can be additional zoning within residential. For example, R1 may be for single-family homes, R2 may be for duplexes, R3 may be for triplexes, and R6 may be for a sixplex, and R7 may be for anything larger. So there's these different additional zoning codes within the code as well. But in addition with zoning, the zoning is going to be similar across county to county, state to state, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly the same. And so to be able to determine those codes, we can just go to the usually in the assessor's office, somewhere we're going to be able to pull up the zoning code list where it'll have a list of the different zoning codes. But usually you're just going to come across, I mean, if it says residential land and it's a building lot, then essentially you know what it is. And so that's the most common one that you're going to come across, unless it's some other type of property.
Yeah, now, let's see here. This is a big one here. Use and accessibility is something that we talk about on a fairly regular basis, and it's important when you're looking at land as well. I mean, again, price really determines everything, but when you're looking at property, some of the things you want to look at and consider is first, how accessible is the property? It needs to be accessible. If it's landlocked, that's a problem. So you need to be able to access it from a public road. Other things, that you need to consider when you're looking at these properties is who might want the property. I mean, you can oftentimes look around at neighbors and identify different people that may, that could possibly want the property or who would benefit from owning the property at least. But it's a question you always want to ask yourself when you're looking at properties because, you basically want to buy with the end in sight. You want to know exactly what your exit strategy is, and that's because you're going to point that out right away and follow an exit strategy. So trying to identify what the property might be used for is important. And you don't necessarily have to have the game plan for what the property is going to be used for either. You are a wholesaler here, okay? And that's something that a lot of people have a hard time getting used to here, is that you're not buying things at retail. You are buying things at the absolute dirt cheapest price. I mean, this is like the Costco of real estate, okay? And so you're paying just very little for these properties. You don't necessarily have to know everything about this, because if you can buy it for a low enough price, and you can sell it for more, then that's basically all you have to worry about. In other words, don't get yourself overly involved with a property. Just remember that you're a wholesaler. I mean, that the idea with these is to be able to turn around and flip them. Or if you want to keep them, that's perfectly okay. But in the process of turning and flipping them, you can also generate monthly revenue.
I mean, I really don't think there's been a better opportunity for investors to go out there and be able to purchase real estate, because before we were so limited by our geography. If you were a real estate investor, you pretty much only invest in real estate within your area. You weren't really going outside of your own area unless you were some big type of real estate investor. In fact, most investors stuck with their own markets and stuck with their own way of real estate investing. And so with the ability of the internet and the way that we can sell properties and the ease that we can pick these properties up and the price we can pick them up, it gives us so many opportunities and flexibility when it comes to the exit strategies. I mean, if you pick up a property for $100, $500, $1,000, then you can turn around and sell it. I mean, even if you just sold it for $5,000 or $10,000, you've suddenly been able to make a turn around and make a huge profit. You could, at a $100 to $500 purchase, you could essentially start earning residual income on that property that almost pays it off every single month. And so there's just a ton of opportunity right now. It's really just a matter of going out there researching lists. I mean, I'm just researching, properties even as we're talking here, as we're going through, just kind of looking at a couple of over-the-counter deeds, and have found all kinds of different properties available. And these are just some of the over-the-counter Florida deed lists that we have. And so there's opportunities everywhere. It's just a matter of identifying those and going through and reviewing the county records and doing some good due diligence.
It's true. We are at a really unique point in time right now, because if we could go back in time to the year 2000, around the time we were getting started, would there be, in other words, would there be better opportunities, with tax sales? And the answer is no. There's better opportunities right now, which is odd. You don't normally find that where you are ahead of the wave, like you are in this case, where the investment hasn't already passed you by. You're still in time to do this, and who knows how long that will last, but I know that it only gets better, so far. It's only become easier to do. It's only become more accessible. They just simplified the process. I mean, all they're doing now is just making it easier and easier, and I think that's what they'll continue to do, is just make it easier. Okay. Now, when we're talking, by the way, when we're talking exit strategies here, we mentioned different ways that you can turn around and sell a property, and these can be unique. I mean, these can be specific strategies for that property. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what your overall investment strategy is. In other words, you can decide to flip a property even though your plan is to have long-term real estate, or the other way around. You could decide you don't want property but still decide to keep one. It's not your overall strategy. But when we are talking duration and time periods, again, that flip, or that short time period, is that 0 to 3 month time period where we want to have that happen, and then we consider anything less than a year to be short term and anything more than a year to be long term. If you want to see, you can go ahead and just cover some of these, some of the different strategies here for selling land, some of the things that, the different methods that can be used.
Yeah, I mean, really, there's going to be a combination of methods, and you are probably going to use more than one. At least that's what we're doing. When it comes to selling property, the first thing that's really on the list, and it's probably should be the first for a reason, is, if all possible, put a for sale sign on the property. Now, you won't necessarily need a for sale sign to sell the property. You can sell it online in other ways, but it's going to be a step that's going to be, unless you're going to sell it really quickly to a neighbor, it's going to be one of the best steps you can do, because it's going to be local advertising. Not, everyone within that area is going to be driving past that property, and they're going to see that it's for sale and essentially have your number there. So that's going to be able to generate essentially a lead source for you, somebody who's going to possibly be interested in the property. Now, in addition with that, one thing that, and this is something you can do at the very beginning, is you could not email, but you can send out letters to the surrounding property owners. So you can explain to them that you picked up this property, or that you're the owner of this property, and you'd like to offer it to the neighbors before you put it on the market. So if that was kind of the first step that you wanted to do, to see if one of the neighbors wanted to purchase it before you put it on the market, you'd be willing to maybe give it to them for a discount, or however that is. That's a really easy way to be able to sell it as well. In addition to that, you can also start advertising on social media. In addition with that, there's going to be all of the auction websites, so sites like eBay, classified websites, working with a real estate agent. And as we go along, we'll go ahead and do smaller trainings on each one of these different subjects about how to go about that process. But it's really just a matter of marketing the property. I mean, really, you can go on eBay or one of these sites right now and start to see properties for sale and get an idea of how you're going to do a similar type campaign.
Part of what's also amazing about the time period we're in right now for selling properties is that so many of these things are the type of thing you can just kind of like set it and forget it kind of thing. You can do it once, and it's not something you have to deal with constantly. I mean, all of these things are easy, when you consider things like classified website and auction websites, and even the mail campaigns and these things. They're systems, that you can get in place so that you simplify the process every time and make it a little bit easier. Seller financing is also a huge opportunity for income and revenue for these types of properties, and that's because, again, you're picking them up for a very low price, which means that you can turn around and sell them for a very low price, and you own them outright, which also gives you the power to offer seller financing. You should. Unless I guess you need. There's no reason to not do seller financing, essentially, because you're not really at any risk of losing the property again, unless it's just not part of your strategy. But you'd be surprised how many people you can draw or attract to your property by being flexible on different terms like that. And it may not be something crazy. You can work out terms with individual buyers, but being willing to, let's say, take monthly payments for a year, in addition to the down payment that the individual makes, something like that's completely reasonable, and it's something that people feel comfortable doing. Because it's a short time period and it enables them to get the property without forking out all the money right away. So really it works well for everybody that's involved. But yeah, really that's one of the few opportunities you have to really act like the bank and to make money the way they make money, which is essentially, they're doing the same things here. They make money with tax liens and by loaning money. And yeah, essentially, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to make a quick point. It's a way that you can start building significant wealth. I mean, if you're talking about building a retirement or building some type of financial future or building a solid income, picking up these different types of properties and seller financing them, it's just going to make you so much money over the years, because these properties essentially have the ability to pay themselves off on a yearly basis at the very most. Sometimes you could even pay it off almost every month off your initial investment. But that's going to give you the ability to earn this residual income, and as you continue getting that money in, you can just continue investing in more and more properties. Where if an individual investor maybe had 50 different properties at one time, and are constantly selling those properties and picking up a few new properties each month. So maybe they sell about 5 properties a month, and then they pick up 5 properties, and the rest of them are essentially on this seller finance contract that are paying monthly payments coming in. Even if just those payments were $100 each, but you had 50 of them coming in, suddenly you're going to start earning and generating this income that's coming in on every single month.
Yeah, residual income it's one of those, it's that golden goose, it's something that people covet, the ability to create regular residual income that you don't have to constantly work for. It is like magic, okay? And what's amazing about this is how easy it is for us to set, how easy it is for us to do this. Because we're picking these things up for such a low price. It makes more sense to offer with owner financing than not. And yeah, like Steve said, obviously, if you start to set these things up, you don't have to set up that many owner financing setups before it starts to make a big impact on your money. Before it starts to bring in a lot of revenue for you. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. Ultimately, if you're trying to get your retirement going, your retirement isn't so much about having $1 million sitting in the bank or whatever amount. It's really more about having regular income. It's about having regular income that you're not actively working towards. And with investing like this, well, that's something you could do at any age. It wouldn't have to require a lot of time, or effort, and have just so many opportunities. Um, and I think we're pretty much out of time here. Land lease is the last thing that we talked about, and uh, people have been doing these types of things for a long time. I think last time we were talking about the fact that farmers oftentimes lease their land because it's cheaper for them to lease their land than it is to own it and to pay property taxes on it. So, uh, there are so many options out there for property, especially if you can find large tracts of land. With large tracts of land, you always have a lot of options with them, and to monetize them. In other words, you may look at a large tract of land and think, I don't know how in the world I would monetize this, but um, you'd be surprised. There are so many people that are looking for land that they can use for various things. And yeah,
Absolutely. I
yeah, go ahead.
mean, that's the great thing about this strategy is especially going after these cheap lots and these cheap properties, and researching over the counter list and different auctions that are taking place, and really doing the tax sale investing is by the price, because we pick these properties out from a penny on the dollar to 10 cents on the dollar. It gives us so much flexibility in the way that we offer the property. So we can do a land lease, we can sell or finance, we can sell it for a discount and wholesale the property. We can sit on the property and just market for, close to market value, and just sit on it and wait till the property sells and just increase in the value as the value of the property goes up. So it just gives us so many different opportunities to be able to offer these properties for selling, because this flexibility where we're not going to be tied down by this investment. The property taxes, what they are. They're going to be a small amount per year, and so you have the ability to sell these properties and earn an incredible amount of profit. Really, like, there's never really been this opportunity before, at least in my opinion. I haven't seen it as good as it is now.
No, the time period that we're at, it couldn't be better. It really couldn't be better. And this literally, like we're saying, we see this as a land giveaway. We see it as being that dramatic, and the the potential profit is incredible. And who knows how long it will be this way, honestly. How easy can they make it before eventually lots of people start doing it and making it, to the point where it's difficult to do? I don't know. I don't know. I certainly think that that is something that can and probably will at some point happen in the future, because there's already better relationships now between people. People already understand more now than they did 20 years ago. In fact, I mean, it's astounding, just how much knowledge has, I guess, changed over that time period, and how much counties are more in touch uh, the investors in getting rid of these properties, and trying to remain financially healthy, as a county, as a local government. So yeah, this is a land giveaway, and we want to see everybody taking advantage of it, because I mean, really, you don't have to be the perfect expert in these situations. I mean, cheap property is cheap property. And we can help also. We can help you through this process. But I mean, if you can pick up property for $150 that is estimated to be worth $10,000, it's a no-brainer. It doesn't take a lot of thinking there. Like we said, it's like they're just giving away land. So, um, with that being said, I think we pretty well run out our time here tonight. We've got lots of new videos and things that we're posting up all the time. So keep an eye out on those things, and we'll try to keep everybody informed about those things. We're also gathering new lists, and so we'll try to let everybody know when we get new lists, or when there's upcoming sales, things like that.
Absolutely. You guys have a great weekend.
Yeah,
Great week.
we will see everybody here next Wednesday night. You can email us or call us if you have any questions or if there's anything that we can do to help, and we'll get the recording for this webinar out if anybody wants a replay of it. So yeah, again, address any questions to us. We're always happy to answer, and we'll hopefully see everybody here next week.